Hey y'all, C.W. Harper with Oracle Book Art Publishing, here to read another excerpt from another really good author. This time I'm going to be reading from Court Human. It is by Hawkins Austin, and Hawkins has quite the biography. He is a radiation effects engineer building the fastest computers in space, but he's had a number of other careers. He's been a professional environment engineer, a survivability engineer, a historian, an author, and a martial arts instructor. He earned his MS degrees in nuclear engineering, plasma physics, material science, instrumentation, and engineering science. So he's worked for NASA, he's worked for NATO, he's worked for MIL. He's also been a fight instructor for both self defense and stage. He's practiced martial arts for over 40 years, and a whole lot of that has been devoted to swords, but he's ranked in White Lotus Eagle Claw Kung Fu and ran a dojo for 12 years. He's worked sword fights for stage on many occasions, including Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and Cyrano. So he's quite the person. And Court Human is one of his fantasies, and it's about fairies and part fairies. So let me read you. It's from, looks about a little over a third of the way into the book. In its chapter 19, Meeting with Penny. The sweet almond roll had a crunchy surface and a deeper flavor of orange and honey buried inside. It contrasted perfectly with the hot, bitter, extremely dark coffee in its too small cup. I sat in my usual spot in the middle of the market, watching the flow of the crowd when Penny walked up. "I thought I'd find you here," Penny said. Oddly enough, the same thing Captain Grix's man had said when he'd found me there a week ago. She'd scrubbed off her makeup, and I much enjoyed her natural look. Like most of Carrigood, Penny was a mix of many worlds. Her skin had a natural blue hue from some infernal ancestor, although she'd filed her horns flat with her forehead. It's a medical condition, and she isn't a pure-blood infernal, so the horns didn't come up straight. Her ears were long and thin like an elf's, and she was naturally hairless, with a faint rippling pattern on her skin that close up gave the impression of scales. Sounds beautiful to me. She wore a pale blue day robe that fastened to her chin and a pair of dance pants, but she graced them with a step that barely kept her toes in touch with the ground. "It is a pleasure as always," I said. I stood and waved her to the seat across from me. She ignored my waves and continued standing. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. I remembered her holding my arm like we were on a date, and yet it wasn't. "Are you and your grandfather still solving mysteries?" she asked. She hadn't even sat down, so we were both standing. My hands were still full, so I stood, chewing like a horse to try to clear my mouth. Penny rarely made me feel like a fool. I wasn't much good at social situations, and she always made me feel as though I was as charming as a court elf. She must have been quite agitated to leave me standing like this, even for a few moments. I finished my poorly timed mouthful, took a sip of the too hot coffee, and set them both on the table. I gave her a quick, fingerless hug and pushed her forcefully into the chair across from me. She looked behind her and around. I think she was ready to jump up and run at the first sign of something. "Yes," I said. I looked around for what was chasing her and ended up focusing on her hands, which kept twisting together around her bag. I was about to say something about being currently busy, but she seemed particularly upset. She dropped a bag of pennies in front of me, about 2 pounds worth in a bag as big as a fist. My head jumped into a math question of the possible makeup of the 2 pounds of pennies. It was maybe $200 in copper. "I've got $1,000, she said. "I've been saving up to get out of the market, but I just found out Tien was killed." I remembered Tien. She was one of Penny's roommates when they'd lived in Cassio's building. She'd been a sweet girl. I stuttered. My brain locked. I really needed to tell her that I had a job, one that paid a good bit more than she could afford. Of course, Aridio was a thief. Maybe this money was also stolen. "Please, Severn," she said. Her eyes looked deeply into mine. Maybe she was trying to find that connection we'd almost had. "Come now, before they clear out her room." I got up, leaving my food behind. I dropped a pair of copper pennies on it and hoped someone would get a good snack out of it. The cousins would have a dinner for me whenever I came home, so I shouldn't have been idling in the market anyway. I snagged the bag of pennies. The sweets would stay on the table longer than $1,000. Penny grabbed my hand and started dragging me through the crowd. Murder wasn't investigated in the market. If someone killed your friend or family, you killed them back. Sometimes this caused a grudge murder or two, at least until the Cassio's bully boys caught you, gave you the thrashing they decided you needed, and kicked you out. That usually stopped the cycle. Two of those bully boys came around the corner and made a beeline for Penny. They looked like all the other enforcers. These wore baggy purple pants and little purple vests. One wore a fez, but it didn't have any rank or insignia on it. Still, I suspected he was the lead here. Penny pulled up sharply and pushed me in front of her. "You can't just lock us out of her room," said the man with the fez. He was a human-looking kid of some teenage years. He spoke to Penny through my chest. "We have to get the body out, clean out the room, and re-rent." I flashed my court badge as he took a step back. The Elven Palace borders the west side of Market, and due to its wealth, has a disproportionate influence. "Penny has hired me to look at the murder," I said. "I'll release her room to you in an hour." He licked his lips. I saw the mental wheels turn. "She was a few months behind on her room payments," he said, "so we're entitled to some compensation." I held up my hand to stop him. It wasn't hardly fair to begin a negotiation this way, but I knew he was lying. Not through any particular skill I had, mind you. In the market, people begin negotiations with a lie. It occurred to me that Penny had started with offering me $1,000. I should have assumed that that was a lie. As well, Penny had turned off my brain. I refocused on the man in front of me and pulled on the power. My teeth ached, but I'd get used to it quickly enough. The fire of truth was coursing through my blood, burning through my lips. "What does she owe precisely?" I asked. My breath was hot enough to steam in the dry air. There was a thrum of power between us, and I could distantly perceive that the Queen watched him. The sun shone brighter just on the two of us, as though the desert sun was just the warm fire from an oil lamp. It felt as though the brilliance of the desert was alive, for in this moment the true brightness of the sun was seen. "Rent today," he said. He blinked, surprised. He probably had thought of some figure that he was going to tell me. His companion stepped back out of the sudden circle of heat. He couldn't see the cause as I could, but he knew something magical happened here. The crowd spread, giving us room. The boy in front of me broke out in a sweat. He'd locked eyes with me and wasn't going to break. He had to swallow twice. He might have planned some further lie, but he hadn't that strength. Her room goes for $5 a day. My bag was emptying quickly, but I had a few coppers left without opening Penny's bag and digging. I scraped the bottom of my coin purse and came up with a 5. "You can rent it after the sun sets." I smiled at him and he backed up a step. "I'll take it for the rest of the day." He nodded at me. He wanted to argue, but his buddy was shaking his head and backing up. He was ready to spend 5 pennies on a couple quarts of beer and call it a win. They bolted, and I let them go. Penny started walking before they turned around. I hoped for a thanks, but I'd have to agree that the murder rated ahead of personal concern, so I didn't take it personally. I just liked the thought of her thanking me. I remembered her bowing to me in her show. Math problems were less distracting. I followed Penny through the crowds and tried to get my head around telling her I wouldn't be able to do any work for her, with the Queen's business hanging over me. I'm sure the Queen would ask me why I was abusing her power. Perhaps I should do it more often, then they wouldn't call me to be questioner anymore, or perhaps they'd kill me. I mulled on this as we wound around the tents. I kept a firm grip on Penny's bag. I was going to have to give it back to her. If I was sure I'd keep up the rent, I could quit the summer court. But I'd have to live on Penny's life savings and other needy people like her. I didn't like taking money from people who needed it. I much preferred taking from the elves. Am I thinking about this backwards? I questioned myself. If I took money from the elves, I could afford to take cases like Penny's. I just needed an excuse to stay questioner. Perhaps if Moran, M-U-R-A-N, Moran, was killed in a mysterious way. We exited the crowd and started climbing stairs. They were huge chunks of granite pulled from some mountain hundreds of miles away to the north. Of course, they hadn't been pulled here for these stairs. They were probably pieces of some old road or a fortress wall. Karagut was built out of pieces in other places and people by other races. This was a city that no one intended, but it just kept happening here. Climbing above the market put us back into the direct sun. My wide brim hat shaded my eyes well, but I found myself looking up into the sun to keep my eyes on Penny's legs. Their shape, pressing back against her robe, entranced my eyes. I realized that I also wanted to tell Penny that I might have been interested in extending our relationship. She tricked me into a robbery, then she'd vanished. She hadn't spoken to me in 2 years, so I expect that possibility was as dead as her friend. Apparently, I said, I do reckless things for women. What? Penny asked, looking back. I didn't hear you. Nothing, I said. I let her get a few steps ahead and hurried to keep up. Everything. Iridio acted like nothing had happened, but he hadn't visited the castle, and we hadn't talked about that night. Penny hadn't even made the first step. It made it all the more strange that Penny would hunt me to help her, but there wasn't a lot of crime, investigators in Karagut. Penny's apartment sat at the top of the rise. It was a hideous cube of a building with only a handful of windows on the outer wall. She took me in and up the interior stairs. I was getting tired of stairs, but we found Tien's room on the 9th floor. I opened the door, Penny explained. I looked up and down the hall. Even this high, there was sand on the floor. The stones had run out at the 5th floor, and these walls were made of big, somewhat sandy bricks. People cooked behind doorways and curtains. Children ran between rooms with small dolls clutched in their hands. The smell of the streets had fallen away, but the combined odors of life had their own intensity. I locked it back as well, she said. There was an impressive black lock hanging on the outer latch. Penny pressed it with her hand and it popped off. It's a prop, she explained. I didn't have a real lock except on my door, and she waved her hands. I understand, I said. Any unlocked room would be robbed before you cleared the building. Karagut wasn't kind to the poor. She couldn't leave her room unlocked any more than she wanted Tien's room unlocked. She opened the door, and the furnace heat blew out, along with the ripe odor of decay. The smell was bad, but not overwhelming. I saw how it could have been missed. Bodies left this hot and dry, cooked to a hardened state that didn't rot. I didn't recognize the corpse as Tien, but it was a woman and very dead. The last 5 or 6 days had dehydrated her skin, and the muscles in her limbs were pulled up halfway to a fetal position. Her internal organs hadn't dried completely. A small amount of corpse blood foamed at her mouth. She hasn't been seen for like a week, Penny said. I didn't think to check in on her till now. She shrugged. She didn't have a boyfriend that I knew about, but she had customers. I don't know who, but I want to know which one did this to her. I felt my jaw tighten. Penny wanted revenge. I nodded at the mangled girl in front of me. I was going to give it to her if I could. Again, it took at least 5 days in a hot, dry room to reduce a corpse like this. The last week, the temperatures had stayed over 100 degrees. Since her organs hadn't dried out entirely, I wouldn't put her death more than 10 days out. Tien's lock was laying on her bed. The center spring was pulled out through the hole, the usual result from picking a lock with the hook of a rope knife. That was indelicate, I said. I waved at the bed. Penny frowned. Whoever locked her door, Penny explained, they left with the key. She looked embarrassed. I should have gotten Iridio to open the lock, but I smelled something, and I waved it away. Her reasoning didn't matter. I didn't see the key laying around the room, which meant they hadn't vanished through some magical means. The killer had walked out that door. If she'd been missed, they'd come to her door, knocked, and she hadn't answered. The smell from the blood would have been bad the first day, and the organs would have started to stink around the 5th. The drying wasn't perfect despite the furnace heat. We were at least 100 feet above the ground. The insects wouldn't swarm the corpse up here. I hadn't seen Tien in years, but she'd been very young. She looked human with long red hair. I didn't know her background, but she didn't have any distinguishing features. With Penny's makeup kit, fake ears or horns, Tien could have passed as anything from elf to an infernal. I was seeing red hair again. It wasn't a common color, but it turned up on 3 murdered or nearly murdered bodies this week. That went beyond coincidence. Her corpse was wearing a light underrobe, the type you'd stay home in. In the basket beside her bed were 2 other robes, neither one particularly fashionable, but sufficient for going out in the day. She had a few small pieces of jewelry, a bracelet, a necklace, and a small jeweled hairpiece. None of them were worth as much as a face coin, maybe a copper one. I avoided looking at the corpse. I felt the queen behind my eyes for a moment. She'd heard my question to the bully boys and started paying closer attention. I turned to the body and focused on the corpse. The queen had a sudden intense interest, then shuddered and faded away. The queen didn't have the hardened soul of Duchess Morgana. I'd been Morgana's questioner, and I'd felt her fascination with the dead. She had no intention of ever dying, so it showed only a morbid curiosity with no depth of feeling. Queen Titiana seemed to care about a dead human, or perhaps she saw Tien as a mirror of Brianna. The features had been obscured by death and by drying, but they were clearly similar to Brianna's. Morgana wouldn't have flinched, but in the hell pits of her heart, I doubt she felt anything. The cause of death wasn't in question. Someone had cut her from navel to chest. They cut through the bottom 2 ribs on her left side. The chest cavity opened. The paving stones on the floor crusted in her dried blood. I didn't have to check. They'd pulled out her heart. I wish they'd left a reasonable clue. Tien hadn't struggled. Her bed was splashed with blood, but otherwise untouched. If the man had come for sex, there was no evidence of the act itself. Anna, I requested. Her little form appeared above my hand. Yes, questioner, she replied. With a small gasp, Penny stepped back from me. The Fae frightened people, even when they were small. Frankly, even small Fae could channel enough magic from the blue heavens to kill someone. I hoped that Anna wouldn't try it. It would certainly destroy her. Peace, Penny, I said. She'll not harm you. I gave Anna a hard stare. You'll not harm her. As you wish, Knight of 7 Stars, she replied with an elegant bow, then stuck her tongue out at me. Anna, I asked, I expect magic has been used in this room. It was hard to ask questions without pushing the power, but Anna understood me. How recently, she asked. A week, 2 weeks, I said. That should be sufficient. Anna flew around the room in great arcs. Penny, despite her fear, was drawn into the middle of the room, watching the Fae turn circles around her. What is she doing? Penny asked. I have no idea, I said. I put my arms around her shoulder, intending to be comforting. The ways of magic outside of the simple skills of reading books and calling on the ascended ones eluded me. I hope she can tell me if the killer used magic. Penny shrugged my arm off. Look, she said, this is business. I pulled on the hair of my goatee and controlled my grimace. Absolutely. We set you up before, she said. I'm sorry for that. We made you the patsy, and I owe you an explanation. No, I said, you don't. I turned from her and went back to work. The shutters were open. It was midday, but I craned my head out of the window and could still see Helios's fire heading west towards the elven forest. I looked out over the market, as she no doubt had every morning. It was a good view. I would have looked. I had to lean out over 100-foot fall to grasp the shutters and bring them in. After I had pulled the left one in, I looked down and saw a dozen people looking up. On an average day, a man playing with the shutters was interesting enough to watch. Whoever did this, they didn't open the shutters, I said. She wouldn't have left them open during the day. Obviously, that meant the murder had happened at night. Did she have anything, I asked? Anything anyone would steal? She didn't have anything, Penny said, shaking her head. Like me, she'd just gotten free from Cassio. She just worked. The Soul Taker came at midnight 7 days ago, Anna said. The Soul Taker is real? Penny asked. I didn't agree or disagree. Anna believed in the angel of death. That was sufficient for my calculations. It gives us a time of death in any case, I said. I thought about what Penny had just said. You were working for Cassio. I didn't want to put it as a question, but I felt the heat in my mouth. Yes, she said, Lord Ganios, the elf. You needed to question. We knew he collected captured Fae. Cassio wanted whoever was in that vase. She shrugged. Aridio and I didn't get details. It was work. I got the 10 faces deal from Cassio. I knew the deal. For 10 gold faces, Cassio would sell you anything he could he could get in the market. You could ask for a murder, girls, anything. The vase was worth more than 10 faces, Penny said. I bought me. She turned me with a hand on my shoulder. She wanted to see my face. I was a slave, Severn, she said. I was a personal escort for Cassio whenever he needed one for whoever he wanted to have me. That vase bought my freedom. I nodded. I'd expected as much, but it hurt. I was just work. My one marriage had been arranged by my mother to attach me to Countess Elistanda's clique. My one girlfriend since then had been to arrange a burglary. I didn't have a high opinion of myself, but was absolutely getting lower. Anna buzzed around the floor, crossing the body twice. Magic was here, she said. She perched again on my shoulder. I sensed a demon bound into Jim on a small black knife. He broke her body. There was a second demon bound into a blade. His smoke fills the room with darkness, but he did not taste blood. Tien didn't have anything like that, Penny said. She was just an orphan. I held up my hand to quiet her. I knew full well that Tien didn't own a demon-enhanced weapon. Those were found in the collections of the extremely wealthy, infernal warlords, powerful fae, and of course elves. So, I asked Penny, you came to me. I hefted her bag jingling with coins. I wanted to question her, but I held myself back. Other men are as qualified as I am to find Tien's murderer. Penny looked at me. Her expression told me she hurt inside. I could tell that she cared about Tien's death, but I still didn't understand why she'd come to me about it. Severn, she said, I trust you. She hugged herself and tried to put it in simple enough words for me to understand. You're a good man, Severn. I was a damned prostitute, and Iridio had a way to get me out. You trusted me, and you shouldn't have. But 2 years later, and you still haven't come after me. What? I felt the question, but I couldn't stop it. My teeth ached from trying to hold it in. I used you, and then I left you for an elven lord's idea of justice. Angry tears leaked from her eyes. You could have died, but you never came after me or Iridio. He deserved it, and you just let it go. She took a breath. Thank you. I lifted my hand to wave it away. I honestly hadn't thought about it like that. I don't trust anyone, she said, and I don't want a relationship with you or anyone else, but I know I can trust you with my life. Tien's life. She swallowed and looked away. You're one of the good guys. I don't know if I qualified as good, but I got back to work. Prostitution was another clue. Tien was dressed appropriately for a romantic night. Her killer might have come promising an evening of love. Brianna may have died in much the same way, expecting a lover's embrace and receiving death. Anna, I said, I had to phrase this carefully. Elves' illusion. On it, boss, she said. She gave a big sniff by the door. Given the amount of rotted meat in here, it couldn't have been pleasant. But she ate magic. She was smelling something completely different. It's like a perfume over here, she said. I'm not sure they used any illusions in here, but it does smell like elf. I held up my hands and she lit on it. She took a few more sniffs as she walked slowly around the room. Yeah, she said, pure fae blood full of yummy magical goodness. I grimaced at that. Fae had to eat magic, and elf blood was full of it, but it crafted an unpleasant image in my mind of Anna's chewing on some elf's throat. Cursed, too, she said, interrupting my thoughts. Cursed? Damn it. I held the power of question back by clamping my teeth together. Anna buzzed out the window. I exhaled when she'd safely left the room. I think I burned my tongue, I muttered. Penny looked at me with a strange expression. I raised my hands in an unspoken question. Well, she said, I'm not kissing it better. I snorted, and it broke the tension in the room for a minute. We were still in here with a stinking corpse. Her friend, a gentle person, truly, had been murdered. It wasn't going to get better without me working. Anna buzzed back into the room, and it got me moving. I can't tell what kind of curse he had, Anna said, in case you wanted to know without killing me. I slipped. I said sorry. Her killer hadn't stolen anything. I gritted my teeth and touched the wound. I felt the shock and knew that a magical blade had taken her life. I saw Penny flinch as the spark leaped to my hand. Anyone who'd watched one of the old plays knew what that meant. Penny had performed them. I think she used a white scarf to show the spark leaping from the hero's body to her hand. It showed he'd been slain with a magic weapon. Severn, Penny's voice shook. I didn't tell you before, but there have been other killings. I think they were all human girls like Tien, who would use a weapon as powerful as that on a. I didn't know either. It was a pointless waste of power in the Elven Palace. Here it seemed like a joke. I'm frightened, she said. If he could kill Tien this way, he could kill anyone. Who would? Why? Her words ran out, and she stood there for once. Her confident face facade slipped. Tears leaked at the corners of her eyes. I stood and pulled her into my arms. There was no intimacy there, but we both needed the comfort. Somewhere there was a man who could move through shadows. He could kill in the courts of the elves or the apartments of the poor. He couldn't be tracked by wolves or magic. I just needed to find out why. I don't have an answer, Penny, I said. I only have better questions. All right, so that's one chapter of this book, Court Human. I have not read all of it yet. It is excellently written, though, and I love how even though there are demons and elves and fae and all humans, all sorts of things, they all have their flaws pointed out. Nobody's perfect, and I love that. I don't really like perfect characters. So anyway, this is available on Amazon. I think Ingram Spark. I'm not sure, but maybe. But for sure, Amazon. And I think it is worth a read. Anybody that likes fantasy, especially with a little bit of a dark touch, I think they would love this. Anyway, until next time, have a good one.